South Africa has mostly hit the news for all the wrong reasons, be it xenophobia, workers' strikes or current blackouts. But as you will find out, the country is unlikely to lose its most preferred investment destination status. Hello and welcome to Global Business. As we bring you up to speed with all the latest happenings on the business front, I am Penina Karibe in Nairobi, 9 p.m. here in East Africa. Wherever you're joining us from, welcome to the show. Also coming up, South Africa's opposition calls for end to Eskom's monopoly, and how a small village in Cameroon is tapping its way into fame and fortune. South Africa's main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, wants the government to end Eskom's monopoly in favor of independent power producers. The party held protests outside the Eskom head office in Johannesburg on Wednesday as the country went through its third and fourth round of national load shedding. DA leader Musi Maimane said more power producers would offer the state utility some form of competition and South Africans more consistent power supply. South Africa's parliament is yet to pass the Independent System and Market Operator Bill that would allow independent power producers to enter the electricity market.
Everywhere where there's a monopoly, if that monopoly fails, we must break down that monopoly and bring in independent power producers.
We as a company have no say about the privatization because Eskom is owned by the government. So in other words, the government will have to make a decision as to when, if at all, they want to privatize Eskom. Well, the DA is part of the government, and most of the time when you go to cabinet to inform them about what's going on, they are part of those deliberations.
But it's not all doom and gloom in South Africa. The continent's most advanced economy is expected to retain its position as the leading investment destination in Africa for at least the next 10 years. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development voted South Africa as one of the most open investment jurisdictions in Africa, as CCTV's Sumitra Naidu reports.
South Africa is one of the most politically stable countries in the world with a well-developed financial market. It's also the most developed country in Africa. It's no surprise that it remains the top investment destination on the continent.
We've got a mature capital market system, and it's as well developed and as advanced as anywhere in the world. So even compared to other emerging markets, in countries like Nigeria and Kenya, where you've got growing capital market systems, but like many emerging markets, they're still very immature.
According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, South Africa received 24% of the total foreign direct investment into Africa between 2007 and 2013.
FDI goes to where essentially it ticks the boxes from a compliance perspective. South Africa has the laws and has the policies already within its framework to receive FDI flows. Moreover, it has the infrastructure. So, and those two things cover legal, they cover tax, they cover liquidity, which is critical to any investment coming into Africa.
But experts say while South Africa commands the lion's share of foreign capital inflows into the continent, it should not be seen in isolation. Africa makes up for 5% of the $1.4 trillion global investment pie. Kenya flies the flag for East Africa as a regional hub and remains a top destination for foreign investors. Nigeria maintained its spot in the top 3 of the list despite a minor decrease in FDI, remaining an attractive proposition for investors. Ghana enjoyed the highest percentage increase between 2012 and 2013, with 58 projects in the space of a year. Egypt suffered a near 27% decrease in FDI projects in 2013 due to political unrest. Morocco also suffered a massive drop between 2012 and 2013. Mozambique, though, pushed ahead with a rise from just 4 projects per year between 2003 and 2007 to 33 in 2013. Zambia took the leading newcomer spot. Tanzania suffered a 25% decrease in FDI projects but managed to remain in the top 10. And Uganda has become one of the emerging hotspots for foreign investment.
The important shift in mindset that we perhaps need to make is not to view other African markets as being in competition with South Africa. That actually realizing that the broader African region is in competition with other emerging market regions. A strong South Africa and a South Africa that's attracting investment is good for the rest of the continent. Similarly, a strong Nigeria and/or a strong Kenya, Ethiopia, Angola, and so on that are attracting investment is good for South Africa.
South Africa is likely to remain the best bet for foreign investors, as most African markets have only recently started welcoming investments.
Still very early days in terms of projects and investments that have actually worked. The privatization of the power sector, renewable power, oil and gas, all these things in terms of opening up to the private sector only just happened in the last 10 years.
Despite a volatile global economic climate and subdued growth, African economies are growing at a rapid rate. Foreign direct investment into the continent is expected to double over the next 10 years. With other countries only now starting to attract foreign investment, South Africa remains the key hub to drive that growth. Sumitra Nadu, CCTV, Johannesburg.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about that. Angela Kopla joins us live from Johannesburg, while Mariam Bimad is live for us in London. Angela, let's begin with you. So the Democratic Alliance wants the government to end Eskom's monopoly, and Parliament is yet to pass the Independent System and Market Operator Bill that would essentially allow independent power producers to enter the electricity market. Does it look like the government will heed these calls?
Well, the IPPs have been asking for that piece of legislation or clarity for several years now. The problem is that the bill will open up the competitive landscape, which in some quarters is seen as privatizing Eskom, which is not on the cards just yet. It hasn't helped recently in terms of that legislation that the country has seen 3 ministers of energy in the last couple of years, and each one of them is wanting to stop the clock to get to know the sector. And this is despite the institutional memory and knowledge that sits within the senior and middle management teams within that department. There's also no indication that this bill is going to be signed anytime soon. Of course, that may all change when President Zuma addresses the nation and updates the state of the nation, or updates everybody about the state of the nation as it stands right now. But on a socio-economic level, government also has election promises to keep. Electricity is one of those. So it's unlikely that government is going to let go of Eskom that quickly or that easily. Panina?
Right. So, Mariam, coming to you, despite South Africa being a leading investment destination in the region, how are investors reacting to the Eskom blackouts?
Well, investors are not necessarily worried about one blackout, but rather the warning that we could see daily blackouts for the next 3 years. Let's not forget, we're just coming off a series of minor strikes, intense labor disputes, which already shattered the platinum industry and South Africa's mining sector. Foreign investors were spooked, causing the GDP to contract more than 0.5% in Q2 of last year. Now investors are worried that an ongoing blackout because of state-run Eskom, which has been underfunded for years, will only cause more chaos when the generators run out. And more worryingly for investors is the lack of long-term plan by the government if the lights go out. That, coupled with areas like manufacturing struggling because of global growth slowdown, means investors are seeing new red flags.
The interesting thing, though, Angelo, here is that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development report says that South Africa is expected to retain its position as the leading investment destination here in Africa for at least the next 10 years. But with a cocktail of power blackouts, the xenophobic attacks we're hearing of, and what most investors say is a high and skilled labor force, how is it expected to retain that position in the face of stiff competition from other emerging markets?
Well, I guess, Panina, that's the billion-dollar question here. Government ministers will argue that these are all temporary issues, besides, of course, this highly paid, unskilled labor pool, which is essentially a systemic issue that plays to the country's political landscape. They also say that the power issues are being addressed, that build programs are underway. And they also say that there aren't any xenophobic attacks, but these are criminals that are acting on their own. Economists, on the other hand, will argue against that. One I spoke to today said that government is alienating established business, siding with the unions in certain instances, for example. And the same economist says that while the plans are all there in terms of the NDP and the strategic development framework, the language that government is using isn't the same and isn't acting within those guidelines that those two policies are out there. So, on the other hand, I was reminded a little while ago by another economist that on the power question, we must bear in mind that, for example, Nigeria doesn't have uninterrupted power, and neither does India. Panina?
Right. So, Mariam, if these remain long-term problems, will foreign investors start shying away from putting money in South Africa projects, and what sectors would feel the biggest impact?
Well, experts say we could see major fallout in everything from retailers to manufacturing to the already weak commodity sector. You know, back in January, Eskom engineers had warned that controlled outages were needed to prevent a collapse of the grid, the consequences of which could be as bad as a take of 2-week blackout before the system is rebooted. But what makes investors shy away from new projects is more on the basis of companies that are now being controlled by the government, like South African Airways, where we aren't seeing the funding needed to keep these companies competitive. As Angela was saying, that the government is saying that there will be things in place for the energy shortage, but we haven't seen the details to that. And Eskom, of course, is no exception, asking for 50 billion rand from the government, but only getting 20 billion. And critics say that these companies should remain private, with incentives offered to foreign investors to create lucrative opportunities for FDI and help domestic growth at the same time.
So, Angelo, how is South Africa assuring foreign investors that the country still want to put their money in?
Panina, it's all about marketing. President Zuma is the ultimate marketer, and he's been on regular marketing visits to European and Far Eastern trading partners. And increasingly and more interestingly, he's visiting more and more African countries. The fact is the country does have several things going for it. It's got a strong financial system. We know that there's a strong judiciary in place with contract law and the legal system, which is solid. And these are things that some of its peers don't have at this stage. So it does give the country a bit of an edge at the moment, but that gap is definitely closing. Panina?
All right, some great perspectives there. Angela Kopla, live for us in Johannesburg. Mariam Bamad, live in London. Thank you both for joining us. Now, an outbreak of the plague has killed at least 71 people in Madagascar, and experts fear those numbers could increase. More than 100 cases were confirmed late last year. The African Development Bank has now stepped in and granted the country $1 million to fight the plague. The amount will be allocated for the purchase of equipment, pesticides and medicines. The fund will be managed by the World Health Organization, but the UN organization will work closely with the Ministry of Health. The plague is caused by a bacteria found in rodents and spread by fleas. Cases were confirmed in at least 20 districts and the capital, Antananarivo. Well, let's take a look at the markets now, and a splash of green across most bourses that we track for you, except the JSE All Share Index, which dipped by 0.42%, as you can see on these figures there. Still ahead, residents of Algiers relish the benefits of the country's 6-lane highway. And how Zimbabwe's young people are keeping unemployment at bay.
This is the first year that Africa will have more foreign direct investment than aid. And it's like the tipping point in terms of changing the way the continent is perceived. And I think this summit very much responds to that call. Now, whether it can materialize what is being announced is something that we'll have to check and see whether it happens.
Watching Global Business, welcome back. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates will invest $10 billion in Egypt before the country holds an investment conference in March. Egypt hopes the conference in the resort Sharm el-Sheikh will generate ventures worth billions of dollars, helping to boost its economy, which has just started to recover from political turmoil triggered by the 2011 unrest. The Gulf states gave Egypt more than $12 billion in aid, deposits for the central bank and petroleum products since the army toppled Islamist President Mohamed Morsi in 2013. Also, let's get more now from Yasser Hakim. He's been following these developments. He joins us live now from the Egyptian capital, Cairo. So, Yasser, are there any details about the $10 billion? I mean, what are the conditions of the loan?
No, the government did not release any details yet, but knowing from previous loans given to Egypt, this will be probably very low interest rates. Some loans were actually without any interest rate. Part of them were given as grants as well, and as a long-term loan that could take maybe 5 to more years to be paid, and it will be deposited at the central bank as part of the foreign currency reserves.
The government says the money will be deposited in the central bank. What is the state of the foreign currency reserves now? I mean, we know it has fallen sharply after the 2011 unrest.
Yes, it did. It did fall from 36 billion to around 15 billion dollars. Currently, it's around 15,500, and that's very low for Egypt. It barely can cover 3 months of basic necessities. And those $10 billion will be very important for Egypt at this point before the economic summit, as it can help balance the currency, the local currency that has been devaluating against the dollar. It will also help to cover the basic goods and services that the government needs to import, especially that already Egypt had $12 billion given from the three Emirates before, the three countries of the Gulf, the three states, and those covered the very important oil and fuel needs for Egypt. Egypt needs at least $10 billion every year to cover its fuel needs, its subsidized fuel and oil. So the money will not be used. There's even more given to Egypt for fuel and oil. So this money will be reserved for the central bank to help balance the foreign currency reserves.
Yes, sir. The news is that the $10 billion will be deposited before the economic conference in March. Is it a portion of the funds and investments promised by the Gulf states for this conference?
Experts thought so, but the government said no. This is totally dispatched. It's not part of any agreement that will happen or will take part during the conference. There's even more expected to be sent to Egypt during the conference, probably as investments, in the form of investments mainly, and in the form of money that could help to fund projects that Egypt needs, such as infrastructure projects that Egypt is calling investors to fund, and other projects such as solar energy, renewable energy and electricity. So this batch of $10 billion has no link to the money that has been promised for Egypt in the upcoming economic conference.
All right, Yasser Hakim, live for us in Cairo. Thank you for joining us. Now, residents of Algiers in Algeria are already reaping economic benefits from the country's 6-lane toll highway. The more than 1,000-kilometer east-west highway that runs from the Moroccan border to the Tunisian border forms part of a larger regional network. The Trans-Maghreb motorway connects Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya and Egypt.
It is easily one of Africa's infrastructure marvel, and it's found in North Africa. The 6-lane 1,200-kilometer east-west toll highway in Algeria came with an $11 billion price tag. It runs from Moroccan border to the Tunisian border, connecting the country's major coastal cities. It is claimed to be one of the largest highway projects in the world. Completion was scheduled for 2013, but the highway has been beset by delays. When it's finally finished, it will have 12 tunnels, 70 viaducts and 60 interchanges.
The East-West Highway is a true lung for the Algerian economy. It connects the major cities including industrial cities like Algiers, Oran, Constantine and Bajea. Commercial traffic is blooming, which is a good thing for the Algerian economy.
The highway has made commuting much smoother, but is also boosting local industries.
This highway is good for us. It has reduced distances. Before I used to take 4 hours, for example, to move from one point to another. Now it only takes me 2 hours. It's good even for the country's economy.
The highway is being financed by the Algerian government as part of a $60 billion National Economic and Social Recovery Program launched in 2005. Noel Makugu, CCTV.
A new lobby group in Zimbabwe is hoping to take the issues affecting the youth straight to government in an effort to improve thousands of lives. They've taken the initiative to access business opportunities through the youth empowerment agenda.
There's no consensus around Zimbabwe's youth unemployment rate. The government says it's at 11%, and most people are now unemployed in the informal sector. According to the World Bank, youth unemployment in Zimbabwe is at 9.3%, but some estimates go as high as 80%. But whatever the figures, young people in the country have realized the need for a mindset change, from the traditional focus on jobs towards an entrepreneurial revolution. The youth are mobilizing themselves through a pressure group to try and get an audience with the government.
We have a government that's in place, but we need to be proactive and responsive to our issues and young people. We have the numbers. Zimbabwe's figures, statistics alone say young people contribute 67.7% of that. We vote these people into offices. If they are not responding to our issues, who are they responding to? I mean, these are the issues we should start to ask ourselves as young people to say, are we going to remain on the receiving end, or we are also going to take charge and be on the driver's seat?
The youth lobby group, Upfumi Kuvadiki Association, was relaunched in Harare recently and committed themselves to youth empowerment. The association stopped operating 5 years ago.
We're here to empower our youth, and where we see a vacuum, we want to fill that. Where we see youth struggling, we want to help, whether it be in farming, whether it be in mining, whether it be just a simple vendor. I think everybody deserves an opportunity.
UKA have asked the government and the private sector to help in the economic empowerment of Zimbabwe's youth. Maria Galang, CCTV.
A look at commodity prices now, and all retreated after 4 days of sharp gains. An early morning fall in oil prices accelerated on Wednesday after data showed stockpiles of US crude rose more than expected last week. Coming up, how a small village in Cameroon is tapping its way into fame and fortune.
Lived in 4 different African countries and with a diverse background, I cherish the personal as well as professional experiences I've had across the continent. It's this understanding of the place I call home that drives me to tell stories about its people, its needs, present and future.
There's just so much happening in Africa in terms of the way forward and development. It only brings positivity.
My place at CCTV Africa is about creating awareness around the realities of a continent that is indeed complex, vibrant, and has great potential.
Africa is my home. How it prospers, the challenges it faces, its people all matter to me because this is my future. I'm Famida Miller, and I'm a reporter and anchor at CCTV Africa.
A small Cameroonian village is reaping the fruits of palm wine. Batimo, located more than 200 kilometers from the country's capital, produces around 10,000 liters of the traditional wine every day for sale across Cameroon. Tonight on Grassroots, we feature one of the wine tappers who are making huge profits.
This small village in the tropical jungle of northwestern Cameroon produces the highest amount of palm wine in the country. Batimo has now earned itself the name the wine capital of Cameroon. Legu Tamu, an experienced tapper, has made a career out of harvesting the traditional alcoholic drink. On a typical day, Tamu scales these 50 fruit trees many times with no safety net.
2 times a day, morning and evening, which I clear. In the morning, I tap, I have the 12 panties. So in the morning, I have 15 liters. And then in the evening, there's too much sun, so the members drop down. I just manage 10 liters.
Cocoa and coffee is also grown in this area, but palm wine is the most popular business. Aside from being the mandatory drink at all celebrations, residents believe the wine has some medicinal properties too.
It helps to take out the debris from your eyes. You find the debris by the sides of your eyes when you wake up in the morning. Also, you hardly see blind persons in this village. The sweet palm wine is very good for cleansing of the eyes.
And Tamu has been cashing in on the demand for the sweet wine.
I bought my bike, but I did my house. Then every of my responsibility is coming out from this pump.
Tamu has been steadily increasing his tapping with an aim to sell 50 litres to the local market every day, earning a total of more than $100. He hopes these trees never run dry. Valdi Carlser, CCTV.
An amazing video has emerged of a wild bull elephant stomping on a camera. The unique footage was captured by wildlife photographer Chris Bray while on a safari expedition in Kenya on Tuesday. Now, Chris later wrote online, quote, "While running photo safaris to Africa and around the world, I love placing my GoPro in unusual locations to capture some unique wildlife interactions." He went on to say, quote, "Here in Kenya, I put my GoPro Hero 3 onto a radio-controlled toy car and gently drove it towards a large bull elephant. Suddenly, the elephant swung around, shaking his head menacingly, and stomped right up to the toy car, deliberately put his foot on top of it, and crashed downwards, smashing it into pieces before wandering onwards. Amazingly, that camera survived. Oh, let's take a quick look at the currencies now before we wrap up. Then Nigeria's naira ended weaker against the dollar on Wednesday, despite the central bank selling U.S. currency towards the close of trading to boost liquidity. The bank has been intervening almost daily in the interbank market since the start of the year, as liquidity is very low due to depressed foreign investment, as Nigeria's economy has been hit by plunging oil prices, and that has sent the naira to record lows. On global business, tomorrow, Cote d'Ivoire launches a Navy patrol operation to tackle illegal fishing. And Egypt launches an initiative that will focus on developing small and medium enterprises over the next 5 years. And that's it for this edition of Global Business. Do send your feedback to globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com. You can visit our Facebook page, CCTV Africa, and you can also stay in touch with Global Business on Twitter using the handle @CCTV News Africa. I'm Penina Karibe. Thank you for watching.